вы смотрите?
Прошел.
Идите отсюда нахуй. На станцию въебал?
Да, прошел.
Есть нахуй. Все. Третий выключатель. Сука!
Охуеть.
Пиздец, это все, меня сот выдохнул.
По-любому, я уже говорил.
Ёбаный рот.
Ukraine blows up Volgograd power grid.
It is a massive development. This changes the logistics map entirely.
It is Monday, February 9, 2026. And the footage coming out of Russia this morning is, well, it's absolutely apocalyptic. We are talking about a city formerly Stalingrad, no less plunged into darkness, a fireball lighting up the pre-dawn sky, and what really looks like a pivotal shift in how this war is being fought.
It certainly feels like it.
Yeah.
This feels like the moment where the infrastructure war truly came home to Russia.
Okay, so before we break down exactly what detonated and why it matters so much for the front lines, I have a quick request for you.
A very important one.
If you support freedom, if you support justice, and you want the truth about what is happening on the ground, you need to subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports.
Do it now. You really don't want to miss out on the analysis you just won't find anywhere else.
Join me in the latest program by Defense Report for the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover a massive explosion at a critical electrical substation in Volgograd, Russia.
And this has plunged half the city into darkness. And this is the crippled key military supply lines.
Right. So this isn't just a flickering light bulb.
Oh, no. This is like a seizure in the central nervous system of the Russian southern front.
That is a big claim. So welcome to the deep dive. We are looking past the smoke, past the official denials to understand what just happened.
We have stacks of reports, telegram videos, satellite data.
Exactly. Our mission today is to unpack how Ukraine just struck at the very heart of the Russian war machine's logistics. So, set the scene for us. What exactly went down this morning?
Well, in the early hours of this morning, February 9th, residents in Volgograd were woken up by a sound that is becoming all too familiar in Russia's border regions.
But probably shocking for a city this deep inside their territory.
Deeply shocking. Reports describe high-altitude detonations. You know, the sound of air defense working, or at least trying to work, followed by this ground-shaking explosion.
I was looking at the video on the Supernova Plus Telegram channel earlier. It's terrifying, but also kind of mesmerizing. You see this blinding electrical arc.
That distinct blue-white flash.
Exactly. And it's followed immediately by a sustained, thick, oil-fed fire. It honestly looked like the sun came up early, but in all the wrong colors.
That visual evidence is actually a crucial piece of forensic data for us.
How so?
You just don't get an arc like that from a small neighborhood transformer. That blue-white flash indicates a massive release of high-voltage energy. It confirms we're looking at a major industrial node.
Okay, so do we know specifically what was hit? There seems to be some confusion online.
There's always a bit of a fog of war in the first few hours. Some local reports are pointing to the Volgograd substation. Others are suggesting it might be the Balashivskaya substation.
Balashivskaya, that name sounds familiar.
It should. Longtime listeners might remember it was targeted back in late 2025. But, you know, whether it's Volgograd or Balashivskaya, the specific name matters less than the function.
Which is?
These are 500 kilovolt substations. 500 kiloV.
Okay, let's unpack that. I am definitely not an electrical engineer. What does 500 kiloV mean in practical terms? Is that just a big substation?
It's not just big, it's a regional backbone. Think of the power grid like a road map.
Okay.
You have your small streets, main avenues, and then you have the massive interstate highways.
Yeah.
A 500 kiloV substation is the interstate highway exchange.
Ah, I see.
It handles the bulk power transfer for entire industrial zones, whole cities.
Yeah.
The transformers inside these things are the size of a two-story house.
So you can't just, go down to the hardware store and pick up a replacement?
Not even close. These are custom-engineered, custom-built units. They take months, sometimes up to a year, to manufacture.
And that's in peacetime?
In peacetime, with global supply chains working perfectly. For a sanctioned Russia, replacing a 500 kiloV transformer is a logistical nightmare. When you take one of these offline, you aren't just flickering the lights. You are creating a huge gap in the grid that cannot be easily routed around.
Which makes the official Russian narrative even more ridiculous. I saw that Volgograd Governor Andrei Bokarov came out this morning.
Yes. What was his take?
He claimed their air defense repelled the attack and that the fire was caused by, wait for it, falling debris.
Falling debris, of course. It is a remarkably consistent phenomenon, isn't it? How this debris always seems to fall precisely on the cooling fins of the most expensive transformer in the district.
It's a very specific kind of bad luck they seem to have. It implies that Ukrainian drones are harmless until the Russian military shoots them down.
It's a necessary fiction. It's for their domestic audience.
Right.
If they admit the drone hit the target, they admit their air defense failed. If they say debris hit it, well, the air defense worked, and the fire is just an unfortunate act of gravity. But for the engineer standing next to a burning transformer, the distinction is purely academic. The grid is fried.
So we have a massive node down. But why Volgograd? I mean, looking at the map, it's deep inside Russia. Why is Ukraine sending valuable long-range drones to this specific city?
It is great, because Volgograd is the gateway. Geographically, it sits on the Volga River shore, but strategically, it is the bottleneck for the entire southern front.
Okay.
This grid powers the Volgograd military district. It's a transit hub for power coming from the huge Volga hydroelectric station and moving into central Russia. But the real target here, I think, isn't the lights in people's kitchens. It's the railway.
The trains. We've talked about this before, but remind us why the trains are so critical for Russia right now.
Russia doesn't fight like NATO. They don't rely on long-haul trucking. They just don't have the fleet for it. The Russian army is tied to the railway tracks. It's their umbilical cord.
And this southern corridor.
It's the main artery. It moves heavy equipment tanks, artillery shells, fuel tankers, down to the occupied territories of Donetsk and Zaporizhia.
And I'm assuming, like most modern railways, these are electric trains.
Overwhelmingly so. The vast majority of Russian military logistics relies on electric locomotives. They're efficient, and most importantly, they have immense torque. They can haul a train with 60, maybe 70 fully loaded cars.
So the grid goes down, the power line above the track goes dead. What happens to that train full of tanks?
It stops. That's it. Immediate paralysis.
But, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, can't they just swap in a diesel engine? Surely they have backup locomotives that run on fuel.
That's the common assumption. But in practice, it is a logistical nightmare. Yes, they have diesel locomotives, but that swap isn't simple. First, there's the issue of scarcity.
They just don't have enough of them.
Exactly. Russia has spent decades electrifying its rail because it's cheaper and more efficient. They don't have thousands of diesel engines sitting in a yard in Volgograd just waiting for this to happen.
So they have to find them and bring them in from somewhere else.
Right. And then you have the physics problem.
Physics problem.
An electric locomotive draws power directly from the grid. It has consistent, massive pulling power. A diesel engine has to generate its own power. It's significantly weaker.
So you'd need more of them to pull the same load?
You might need 2 or 3 diesel engines to pull the same weight that one electric engine could handle.
Oh, wow. So you don't just need a replacement, you need 3 times as many replacements to move the same amount of ammo.
Precisely. And now think about the congestion. You have a main line designed for high-speed, high-capacity electric transit. Suddenly, you're introducing slower, underpowered diesel trains. It creates a cascading traffic jam. A journey that took 12 hours now takes 36.
Yeah.
Trains back up for hundreds of miles.
And I'd imagine a diesel engine chugging along, straining to pull a load of tanks, looks pretty different to a satellite than a cool electric train.
That is the kick me sign attached to this strategy. Electric trains are relatively cool, thermally speaking. A diesel engine working overtime. It lights up like a Christmas tree on thermal satellite imagery.
The exhaust, the engine block.
All of it. It makes the logistics convoys so much easier for Ukrainian intelligence to track. They can see exactly where the supplies are moving and target them further down the line.
So this blackout essentially forces the Russian army to switch to a slower, weaker, and highly visible mode of transport.
You got it. It degrades the efficiency of the entire southern front. And we have to note the pattern here. This is not an isolated incident.
The strikes in 2025.
We saw strikes on the Belishevskaya substation back in October and November of 2025. This is a systematic campaign. Ukraine is engaging in the de-energization of the Russian rear.
It feels like the stakes have really ramped up, though. The context here is just brutal. This doesn't feel like standard attrition. It feels like retaliation.
You absolutely cannot view this strike in a vacuum. It is a direct, calculated retaliation. Just days ago, overnight on February 6th and 7th, Russia launched one of its largest combined attacks in months. We are talking over 400 drones, and nearly 40 missiles hitting Ukraine.
I remember reading the alerts. They were going after the energy grid again, right?
It was more sinister than that. They were specifically targeting the substations that support Ukrainian nuclear power plants, places like Khmelnytskyi and Rivne.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is reckless in the extreme. They forced emergency shutdowns of nuclear reactors. When you cut the off-site power to a nuclear plant, you are forcing it to rely on backup diesel generators to keep the core cool.
And if those fail?
If those generators fail, you are looking at a meltdown.
Sure.
Russia was essentially gambling with a nuclear accident to freeze the Ukrainian population.
It's nuclear blackmail without dropping a bomb.
Precisely. And there's a diplomatic deception here that we need to unpack because it explains the timing of this whole thing. Remember that brief energy strike moratorium we heard rumors about in late January? There was talk of a pause in strikes to facilitate some back-channel talks.
Yeah, I remember that. People were hopeful it was a step toward de-escalation.
It turns out it was a ruse. Intelligence now suggests Russia used that brief pause not for peace, but to stockpile weapons. They saved up their missile production for weeks to launch that massive February 6th assault.
So they used the quiet to prepare a louder bang.
That's exactly what they did.
That is, well, it's deceptive, but unfortunately not surprising. So Ukraine's strike on Volgograd today is the answer to that deception.
It is an asymmetric response. Ukraine calls it long-range sanctions. The logic is simple. If you try to freeze our civilians and risk another Chernobyl, we will turn off the lights in your military districts. We will strike the energy that fuels your war machine.
It sends a clear message to Moscow. You have no safe rear. If you strike us, there is a cost.
Exactly. And that cost isn't just electricity for trains. Volgograd is also a huge oil hub, isn't it?
Massive. It is home to a Lukoil refinery that is absolutely critical for the region. We are talking about a facility that processes something like 15 million tons of crude oil a year.
Now, looking at the reports, did they hit the refinery directly this time? I know there were fires there back in August and November.
It's unclear if the refinery itself took a direct kinetic hit today. But here's the thing about industrial warfare. You don't need to blow up the fuel tank to stop fuel production. This brings us back to what you could call integrated attrition.
Because the refinery needs the power from that same substation.
A refinery is basically a giant chemical plant. It relies on these complex machines called crackers that heat up crude oil to break it down into gasoline and diesel. These things run at incredibly high temperatures and pressures.
And they need massive, consistent electricity to run the pumps, the cooling systems, everything.
So what happens if the power just cuts out?
Catastrophe. If the pumps stop while the oil is superheated, the flow stagnates. That hot oil can actually harden inside the pipes. It turns into a solid coke-like substance.
Like pouring concrete into your plumbing.
It's a perfect analogy. So even if the drone missed the refinery, if the power cut was sudden enough, the machinery might be ruined from the inside out.
A soft kill.
Exactly. The facility looks fine from the outside, but it's a brick. And every hour it's offline creates a fuel shortage for the tanks and trucks on the front line.
It really shows how interconnected everything is. You hit a substation, you stop a train, you shut down a refinery, you starve a tank of fuel in Zaporizhia.
That is the definition of strategic warfare. You aren't fighting the tank, you're fighting the system that supports the tank. And Ukraine is proving they can hit these systems anywhere. We have to mention Kapustin Yar, too.
Oh, I saw that name pop up. That's a missile test range, right?
It's the missile test range in the Astrakhan region, not far from Volgograd. Reports indicate Ukraine struck it recently using their own domestic Flamingo cruise missiles.
Wait, Flamingo? That's a Ukrainian-made weapon.
Yes, and that is a huge development. It means they aren't reliant on Western permission to strike deep into Russia.
And Kapustin Yar is a high-value target.
Very. It's not just the test range. It was the site involved in launching the Oreshnik ballistic missiles, the hypersonic weapons Russia was bragging about last year.
So hitting Kapustin Yar is symbolic as well as tactical.
It says, we know where you launch your terror weapons from, and we can touch you there. It strips away that feeling of invulnerability.
And speaking of feelings, we have to talk about the psychological impact here. We're talking about Volgograd. Historically, this is Stalingrad.
The symbolism is incredibly heavy. I mean, Stalingrad is the holy grail of Russian resilience. It's the city that held the line in World War II. It's a foundational myth of the Russian state.
And now?
Now, in 2026, this symbol of victory is facing daily air raid sirens, blackouts, and explosions. The irony is just palpable.
A city named for a Soviet victory is being de-energized because of a war of aggression started by Moscow.
And for the people living there, the reality is terrifying. I read that airspace was closed over Volgograd, Saratov, and Penza this morning.
That disrupts civilian life completely. You can't fly, the lights go out, the trains stop.
And then there's the information vacuum. Imagine you're a resident, the governor's on TV saying it's just debris, everything is fine, we shot them all down. But you look out your window and you see a mushroom cloud of fire rising from the power plant.
And your lights don't work.
And your lights don't work. That disconnect between what you're told and what you see erodes trust. It drives people to independent sources, to Telegram. It reinforces the idea of the de-energized rear. The war is no longer something over there, it has come home.
And it degrades their ability to sustain the fight, both morally and industrially. It is a war of logistics and exhaustion.
Absolutely. And Ukraine has proven today, on February 9th, that they have the reach, the intelligence, and the technology to hit the arteries that keep the Russian heart beating.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. It is crystal clear that the explosion in Volgograd today was much more than just a fire. It was a calculated strike against the logistics, the industry, and the morale of the Russian war effort, a direct response to the terror we saw just days ago.
And a sign that Ukraine is capable of complex, long-range operations that hurt Russia exactly where it counts.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
Thank you for listening.
Before you go, a final reminder. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your trusted source for timely, in-depth military and defense analysis. We'll see you next time. Keep supporting us so we can continue bringing you the latest developments from Ukraine and around the world.
Stay safe and stay informed.